The door clicked shut behind me, and the sound echoed too loudly in the small office, like a warning I was already too late to hear. The glow of security monitors washed the room in cold blue light, and my hands went numb as I realized this wasn't about a lost purse anymore. My heart was steady, but everything else inside me felt like it was slipping out of alignment. If you've ever trusted someone completely and later wondered how you missed the signs, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this don't start the way you think they do. I remember the faint hum of the screens, the smell of disinfectant in the air, and the weight of knowing that whatever I was about to see would involve the people I loved most. Just an hour earlier, I had been laughing, celebrating, believing I was safe. Now I was being asked to prepare myself for the truth. I didn't know what it was yet, only that it was deliberate, intimate, and impossible to unsee. That was the moment everything started to unravel. The restaurant manager's hand closed around my wrist just as I turned back toward the dining room. Not rough, but urgent enough to stop me cold. He guided me down a narrow hallway, into a small office, and locked the door behind us. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. The room went still. I remember his voice dropping, his face pale, and the weight in my chest when I realized this was not about a forgotten purse. My name is Rachel Monroe. I run a regional logistics firm my father spent his life building. I am practical by nature. I negotiate contracts for a living. I do not panic easily, and I do not indulge in drama. But standing there, with security monitors glowing against the wall, I felt something unfamiliar settle in. Not fear, exactly. Disbelief. I had been celebrating my wedding anniversary less than an hour earlier. I had been laughing. I had been surrounded by people I trusted. Now I was being asked, gently but firmly, to brace myself for what I was about to see. The manager's expression told me this truth would not be small. It would not be fixable with an apology or an explanation. Whatever was on that screen involved the people closest to me, and once I saw it, there would be no way back. Before I explain how I got here, you need to understand what that night looked like before everything broke. That evening had felt like a reward. The restaurant sat along the river downtown, all soft lighting and quiet confidence, the kind of place you chose when you wanted to mark survival as much as celebration. I remember thinking, as I took in the view, that I had finally reached a place where life felt balanced. Work was demanding, yes, but successful. My marriage felt steady. I felt safe. My husband, Mark, sat close to me, his attention gentle and constant. He had a way of making care look effortless. Small gestures, a hand resting near mine, the way he checked in on how I was feeling without making it a production. Across the table sat his mother, Elaine, composed as always, her approval expressed through measured smiles and carefully chosen praise. Beside her was Lily, someone Mark had always described as family, someone I had been encouraged to trust without question. At the time, I felt surrounded by support. There were comments about how hard I worked, reminders that I deserved rest, reassurance that I did not have to carry everything alone. I absorbed it gratefully. I wanted to believe it. Looking back now, I can see how often my well-being was discussed, how easily the conversation circled back to my stress, my health, my need to slow down. It felt thoughtful then. It feels different now. Nothing stood out as wrong in the moment. That is what unsettles me most. The care felt real. The concern felt sincere. Yet every detail was a little too polished, every gesture a little too aligned. When we finally stood to leave, I felt content, even proud of the life I was building. I had no idea that the first crack in that image would come from something as ordinary as reaching for my purse and realizing it was gone. I realized my purse was missing halfway to the car. It was such a small moment that I almost dismissed it. A quick pat at my side followed by that familiar rush of embarrassment. I replayed the evening in my head, trying to picture where I might have set it down, already blaming myself for being careless. I hate inconveniencing people. I hate drawing attention to mistakes that feel unnecessary. Mark noticed immediately. He stayed calm, reassuring, the way he always did when something went wrong. In that moment, his steadiness felt like a relief. He suggested we go back, but there was no urgency in him, no irritation, no concern that felt sharp enough to cut through the haze of my own self-criticism. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a partner who didn't make small problems feel bigger than they were. Elaine looked tired in the back seat, and that tipped the balance for me. I didn't want to disrupt the evening any further. I told myself the responsible thing was to handle it alone. The restaurant was close. It was safe. I was capable. Mark hesitated just long enough to seem thoughtful, then agreed. He arranged a ride for me, kissed my forehead, and watched as I stepped away. The drive back was quiet. I sat with my thoughts, replaying the night, reassuring myself that everyone forgets things sometimes. I told myself this was nothing, just a minor inconvenience. I didn't know then that this choice, made out of politeness and trust, was the moment everything shifted. I was returning to retrieve a purse. I was actually walking back into the truth. The manager asked me to sit before he showed me anything. His caution felt heavy, deliberate, as if he understood that once I saw the screen, there would be no undoing it. I focused on the monitor in front of me, trying to steady my breathing, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. The image froze on our table. My chair sat empty. My purse rested exactly where I had left it. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Mark shifted. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. The warmth left his posture. His eyes scanned the room, not like someone waiting for a server, but like someone checking whether anyone was watching. His hand moved with practiced ease, opening my purse without hesitation. I watched him remove my medication bottle, the one I took every night because I trusted it was helping. He didn't fumble. He didn't pause. He poured the contents out, set them aside, and replaced them with something else from his pocket. He closed the bottle, returned it to the same place, and adjusted my purse so it looked untouched. Elaine watched the entire thing without surprise. There was no alarm, no protest, only a detached calm that made my stomach tighten. Lily leaned closer. Her body language relaxed, almost approving. Whatever doubts I might have clung to vanished in that moment. This was not impulsive. This was rehearsed. The manager explained what those pills actually were and what they were designed to do over time: confusion, memory lapses, emotional instability, symptoms that could easily be mistaken for stress or something worse. The goal was never to hurt me outright. It was to make me doubt myself and to make others doubt me too. As the screen went dark, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it sharpened into clarity. This was not about love or concern. It was about control. And I understood, with sudden certainty, that reacting emotionally would only give them what they wanted. I walked out of that office with my purse on my arm and my face under control. Inside, everything was shaking. Every instinct told me to confront Mark, to demand an explanation, to expose what I had just seen. But another part of me, the part that had built a company and survived years of pressure, knew that reaction would be a mistake. If I showed fear or anger too soon, I would lose the only advantage I had left. On the ride home, I rehearsed calm. I slowed my breathing. I reminded myself that knowledge was power, and power required patience. By the time I stepped through the front door, I had already decided that silence would be my shield. Mark greeted me the same way he always did, with concern that looked convincing enough to fool anyone who had not seen the footage. I mirrored what he expected. I said I was tired. I said the night had caught up with me. When he handed me my medication, I accepted it without hesitation. I let him see me take it. I played the role he had written for me because I understood something then with painful clarity. As long as he believed I was unaware, I was safe enough to think. Alone in the bathroom, I disposed of the pill and stared at my reflection. My fear had not disappeared, but it had organized itself. I stopped reacting and started watching. Every word, every gesture, every moment of concern became information. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, listening to the quiet of the house, I realized something else. The danger did not end when I left the restaurant. It had followed me home, and whatever was happening was already closer than I wanted to admit. That night, the house felt unfamiliar. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow more deliberate. I lay awake listening, aware of how often I had blamed myself for the whispers I thought I heard in the dark. Stress, exhaustion, imagination. That was what I had been told, and for weeks I had tried to believe it. I moved quietly through the bedroom, careful not to wake Mark, letting my eyes adjust. The whispers returned, faint and persistent, close enough to feel personal. I followed the sound to the wall across from the bed, to a framed piece of art his mother had given us. When I lifted it, my hands steadied themselves. Taped neatly to the back was a small speaker, its light blinking softly. In that moment, doubt collapsed. I was not losing my mind. Someone wanted me to think I was. Relief and fear arrived together. Relief that I could finally trust myself. Fear because this meant the manipulation reached into our home. I replaced the frame exactly as I found it and stepped back into the hallway. Voices carried up from the living room. Mark and Lily sat close, their comfort with each other unmistakable. I stayed hidden and let my phone record as their confidence spilled out, their plans spoken without caution. There was no confusion in them, no panic, only certainty. As I listened, the truth settled into place. This was not desperation or poor judgment. It was entitlement. They believed my life, my work, my future were theirs to manage. I returned to the bedroom before I was noticed, my heart steady despite the danger. The observation phase was over. I no longer needed to wonder if I was safe. I needed proof, allies, and a plan. By morning, fear had given way to focus. I knew I could not do this alone, and I knew exactly who to call. Andrew Collins had been my father's attorney for years, a man who valued facts over impressions and documentation over assumptions. When I told him I needed help and that my safety depended on discretion, he did not hesitate. That alone steadied me. I laid everything out carefully. The altered medication, the recording from the night before, the hidden speaker. I watched his expression change as each piece settled into place, not with shock, but with concern sharpened by experience. Together, we began to review what else might exist beneath the surface. We started with Mark's office. I remembered small details others would have overlooked, where keys were hidden, which drawers he guarded too closely. Inside a locked cabinet, we found documents that were never meant for me to see. Drafts requesting legal control over my affairs. A fabricated psychiatric evaluation describing instability and confusion. Financial records showing transfers from my company into accounts connected to his family, labeled as business expenses. Each page added weight, not chaos. This was organized, intentional. Then came the final confirmation. Tucked inside a personal file was a marriage certificate dated years before Mark and I ever met. His relationship with Lily was not an affair born of opportunity. It was a foundation. I was the addition. I felt no urge to scream or collapse. Clarity has a way of quieting everything else. This had been planned long before vows were spoken or trust was earned. Andrew secured copies, documented timelines, and outlined our next steps with calm precision. By the time we finished, I understood that the pieces were no longer scattered. They were aligned. The confrontation would not be emotional or private. It would be public, deliberate, and impossible to dismiss. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, all glass and steel and quiet judgment. Faces turned as I entered, some concerned, some already convinced by the story they had been fed. Mark sat at the table with an ease that came from believing the outcome was settled. I took my seat and let the silence stretch, aware of how small and uncertain I was expected to look. He spoke at length about responsibility and risk, about protecting the company from instability. As he outlined my supposed decline, I kept my eyes lowered and my hands still. The weight of the moment pressed in, and I could feel the room leaning toward his version of events. This was the future he had prepared for me, one where my voice no longer mattered. When the time came for me to respond, I stood. The movement alone shifted the air. I felt my spine straighten, and the fog he had relied on simply wasn't there. I spoke calmly, explaining that I was not confused and that what was happening had been carefully engineered before doubt could resettle. Andrew entered the room, followed by those whose presence carried authority Mark had not anticipated. What followed was not loud. It was methodical. The footage played, showing the moment my medication was altered. The recording followed, revealing plans spoken without caution. Documents appeared next, financial transfers, fabricated evaluations, drafts meant to strip me of control. With each piece, Mark's certainty unraveled. The narrative he had rehearsed collapsed under the weight of proof. I watched his confidence drain away, replaced by disbelief. The room shifted again, this time decisively. Decisions were made quickly. Access was revoked. Oversight was imposed. The power he had reached for was removed in front of witnesses who could no longer look away. As everything settled, I realized I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was lighter. Free. The story being told about me no longer belonged to anyone else. Truth had done what anger never could. When the room finally emptied, apologies came quietly, some sincere, some strained. I accepted them without bitterness. The hardest part was over. What remained was the work of rebuilding, of healing, and of learning how to live again in the absence of constant vigilance. The quiet that followed felt unfamiliar at first. No urgent decisions, no watching my words, no rehearsing expressions. When I returned home that evening, the house was empty and still. And for the first time in months, that stillness felt safe. I slept without medication and woke up without confusion, my thoughts steady and my body finally at rest. In the days that followed, doctors confirmed what I already knew in my bones. My mind was clear. The symptoms I had been struggling with were not signs of weakness or instability. They were manufactured. That validation mattered more than I expected. It gave me permission to trust myself again. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came in small, practical steps. Therapy sessions where I learned to separate vigilance from fear. Long walks without my phone clenched in my hand. Evenings where I didn't feel the need to perform calm for anyone else's comfort. At work, Transparency replaced secrecy, and systems were put in place that no single person could quietly control again. What surprised me most was how quickly peace returned once the truth was acknowledged. The constant tension I had lived with dissolved, leaving space to breathe, to think, to feel without second-guessing myself. Strength, I learned, is not just about surviving a crisis. It is about allowing yourself to recover without shame. As life settled into something quieter and more honest, I began to reflect on what this experience meant beyond my own story. Because what happened to me is not rare, and the lessons did not belong only to me. What this experience taught me is something I carry quietly now. Control rarely announces itself as cruelty. More often, it arrives dressed as concern, repeated so gently that you begin to doubt your own instincts. I learned that when someone benefits from your confusion, your exhaustion, or your silence, that is not care. That is strategy. The hardest boundary I had to learn was internal. Trusting myself again. Listening to the discomfort I used to explain away. Understanding that clarity does not require permission from anyone else. Once I stopped trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding me, my strength returned in a way that felt honest and sustainable. If you are listening to this and something feels familiar, I want you to know this. You are not weak for questioning yourself. You are not dramatic for noticing patterns. And you are not wrong for wanting proof before you speak. Silence can be protection. Patience can be power. And walking away whole is sometimes the bravest ending there is. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Sharing it was not about revenge. It was about clarity and about choosing myself without apology. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where the truth quietly changed everything for you? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and you are not alone.